This week on the Tech Hot Takes, your next iPhone might be Indian. It appears that iPhones are now the new toilet paper. Nintendo might actually be selling the Switch 2 at a loss, and more. Hi all, my name is Davis and welcome to the Tech Hot Takes, the weekly-ish show where we take a look at all of the despair and outrage happening in the world of tech and we see how the people of the internet reacted to it. Yes, this is the show that revels in the downfall of multi-billion-dollar companies. Before we get started, quick shout out to everyone who commented last week here on YouTube, TikTok and even, God forbid, Instagram Reels. This person who literally doesn't have a legible nor readable username commented about the Nintendo Switch 2 $80 game controversy, Switch 2 piracy about to go crazy. And honestly, while I used to seriously judge people for doing a bit of piracy here and there, in this economy, for once, I can finally understand why people pirate games. Now, I'm not saying that I condone the practice, but now I do understand. If you do want to support the channel, be sure to give the video a quick like, subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and please let me know your hottest takes about any of the stories in the comments. Alright, first up, panic buying is back. But this time, no, it's not toilet paper, bottled water, nor anything exciting like that. Rather, it's iPhones. Thanks to Trump's new tariffs on Chinese imports, which are now looking at quite an alarming 145%, people are apparently rushing to Apple stores to snatch up the latest iPhones before the prices get hiked. Now, these price increases might mean that a base iPhone would go from $800 to around $2,000. I mean, if I was due an update, I would definitely be tempted to panic buy too, because a $2,000 or $3,000 iPhone is definitely not something that I would want to be facing. I mean, imagine how expensive the Vision Pro would be. It'd be like $10,000. According to a report by Bloomberg, while Apple stores are not quite seeing the traffic akin to that of an iPhone launch weekend, they are still seeing a massive spike in sales, especially for high-end models like the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Apple Sith in the comments of Mac Rumors says, panic buying $1,000 devices, but I thought that the economy was crashing. I mean, these people could just be opportunistic investors, because if the iPhone doubles in price, then you could very much secure a very healthy profit. Johnny B098 on the same website comments, panic buying iPhones is the definition of first world problems. The whining is hilarious. I mean, I think that you're pretty much the only one who's doing the whining here. The rest of us are just enjoying spending the last of our savings at the shrine of Steve Jobs. And I don't appreciate the judgment, sir, / they there. And Darren H says, I wanted to buy one too. Instead, I ordered a Mac Studio M4 Max. I mean, Darren, flexing your custom Mac Studio build on an iPhone panic buying thread. Man, you are living my dream. Maybe it's time that I finally upgraded from my old M2 MacBook Pro. But then I remembered that I don't live in the US, so I don't have to panic after all. Isn't that nice? But seriously, you know things are bad when people panic buy tech. And I feel like that this might just lead to the idea of people traveling overseas just to buy a new iPhone or MacBook. You know, like those people who fly to France to buy the latest Hermes Birkin handbag or something. But while Americans are busy panic buying, it seems like that Apple is already a step ahead, because now they are introducing Indian iPhones. Yep, your next iPhone may now be Indian. In light of the new 145% tariff on all Chinese imports and the 90-day pause on tariffs on all other countries, Apple is reportedly flying a whopping 1.5 million iPhones, that is 600 tons worth of iPhones, straight from India to the US to dodge the tariffs. And that is on top of the additional stock that they've been piling up ever since the rumors of a tariff began months ago. I mean, I feel that airports might be doing full body scans for iPhones instead of explosives now. And as the 90-day delay on tariffs outside of China will probably only remain temporary, I could imagine a world where far more US iPhones come from India instead of China, as Trump is only proposing a 26% tariff on Indian imports. But do we actually want Indian iPhones? That is the question. Because for a while, Indian iPhones haven't had, let's say, the best of reputations, with concerns about poor quality control and also the fact that they only built entry-level models there for a long while. Well, there is hope. iPhones are only being made in India because of Indians' own tariffs, which essentially forces all Indian market phones to be made locally. And not only are reports of quality getting a lot better recently, but they've also begun to produce the entire lineup of iPhones, not just the base ones, including the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and that helps satiate the demand from the growing middle class there. And currently they contribute to around 14% of the global total production of iPhones, and while that does sound impressive, this still only means that Apple is on track to produce 25 million iPhones in India this year. And with 10 million set for the local market, that only leaves around 15 million for the US, and this is nowhere near enough for the 50 million or so iPhones that are sold in the US annually. And of course, the internet had a field day with this story. Silly ad 6391 on Reddit says, "Is India short for Indiana? I thought that we were getting more American manufacturing." And Radioactive Cat says, "Lol, lol, 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 amiga, make India great again." Now that's probably not what Donald Trump was intending to do, was it? Stay Aware 7405 says, "iPhone made in India/China, $1,000. iPhone made in the USA, $10,000. Yeah, well, there have been some reports that are suggesting that American-made iPhones might cost $3, $10, or even $20,000. Like, this range in figures occurs simply because there's basically no supply chain in America at the moment, so it's extremely difficult to actually estimate just how much an American-made iPhone would cost. So let's just hope that Indian labor is cheap enough not to see too much of an increase in prices. But yeah, if you are American, definitely expect your next device to come from India. And moving on to Nintendo, because apparently chaos isn't exclusive to Apple. If you thought that fans were mad last week about the $450 Switch 2 console and having to pay a whopping $80 for a digital download game, then I'd say actually don't be angry at Nintendo, because apparently they are willing to sell the Switch 2 at a loss. Yep, in retaliation to the Trump tariffs, Nintendo might actually choose to lose money with every single Switch sold in the US. Now, while this does sound a little bit insane, it's actually something that a lot of consoles did in the past, like the PlayStation 3. And the idea is that they would make the money back with game sales. And I believe that Nintendo definitely will, with games priced at $80 or even $90. However, Nintendo isn't completely dumb, and they've been seeing this from a mile off. So recently what they've been doing is switching Switch production from China to Vietnam, and because of the pause on tariffs, within the next 90 days or so, there will only be a 10% tariff for all the devices that they can ship over from Vietnam during that period, instead of 46%, which is still significantly less than the 145% if they were to import them from China. And like what Apple is doing with the iPhone, Nintendo has shipped a tremendous amount of units to the US, and currently it seems like that they might have a stockpile of over 1 million units. However, once those consoles sell out, who knows what will happen. So it is currently estimated that the Switch 2 costs around $400 to produce. So even at a 10% tariff, it would mean that Nintendo would essentially lose money with each console. But the analyst is saying that Nintendo is reportedly happy to eat that cost because the American market is so important to them, making up about 1/3 of their total market. However, I can't really see Nintendo's charity continuing if the tariffs extend much beyond 10%. But if you thought that this was bad for Nintendo, at least they are not PlayStation, because the PlayStation 5 is currently only exclusively made in China. So they are going to be facing the full 145% tariff. So definitely expect to see a massive price hike on those in the future. QWed113 on Reddit says, "I believe that's around how many units the original Switch sold in the US in its first week alone." Well, I guess then if you don't get your pre-order in, then you might be paying a lot more for your Nintendo Switch 2. DrewBot33 says, too bad, scalpers will get them all. I mean, if Nintendo have to increase the price by 50% after the first million units, then all the power to the scalpers. I've actually been selling some of my old devices for a profit recently, and it's such a great feeling making money on used tech. And Dar3NV2 says, I'm not a fan of Nintendo, honestly, but everyone is posting their old Switch on Facebook Marketplace, so people are going to buy the new one no matter the price. So I guess the question is, would you buy a $700 or even $800 Nintendo Switch? Because I have to be honest and say that I probably wouldn't. But again, I'm not really a Nintendo sort of person. So if you are thinking of buying any gaming console in the US at the moment, like a Switch 2 or a PS5, I'd say that it's probably time to panic buy. And now onto the crown jewel of this week's disasters. Siri. So Siri has been an absolute disaster, but things look like that it might finally be about to change. So according to a report by The Information this week, it's been revealed that Apple's Siri team has basically been stuck in a permanent group project-like nightmare. There's been infighting, missed deadlines, features that only exist in keynote videos. So yeah, a complete disaster basically. So in the report, we discovered a number of things, including that Apple weighed up multiple options for the back end of Apple Intelligence, and a lot of the issues were derived from the fact that instead of just sticking to one direction, the ever-changing leadership caused a lot of flip-flopping, from building both a small and large language model, first run on the iPhone and then in the cloud for larger tasks, to handling everything in the cloud and then back again and then whatever. And this environment basically caused engineers and talent leaving Apple in droves. Apple's insistence on protecting users' privacy as well also made things super frustrating. Internally, Apple's AI team is so bad that they're actually dubbed as aimless, as in like AIM-less, if you remember what AIM was. And Siri has also been described as a hot potato that is continuously being passed between different teams with no improvements being made over the past decade or so. And worst of all, the report claims that the demo of a variety of Apple Intelligence's more impressive features at WWDC, like finding a user's real-time flight data and creating reminders using like iMessage data or something, was completely fictitious and actually came to a surprise to the Siri team at Apple. In fact, the only feature that was working at the time of WWDC was the new Siri animation. But to be fair, it is a very impressive animation indeed. However, it seems like that the team now under the leadership of Craig Federighi is making some positive change. Apple engineers are now actually allowed to use third-party open source LLMs for Siri, which should allow the personal assistant to somewhat finally catch up to the competition. And I feel that while it isn't ideal for Apple's sense of pride, they are so behind that it's probably their only chance to catch up at this point. MacRumors comment section had a lot to say about this. Sully54 says, announcing a feature that didn't even exist is still what gets me. To be fair, we all saw that happen with AirPower, didn't we? And this is no different. Ross Dush says, the move to fully pre-recorded keynotes has enabled this. Now they can literally fabricate features. Take my AirPower example again, and that puts a spanner in the works of your theory, doesn't it? But I can't say that virtual keynotes have helped. And D. Hagen4755 says, the wheels are falling off the bus. Apple needs more than a leadership shake-up here. Well, if anyone could save Siri, it would be Craig, so fingers crossed there. Honestly, this is something that needed to have been implemented years ago at this point, and I think I trust Microsoft Clippy more than I trust Siri. And now finally onto something that's not a complete disaster, unless you're Google that is, because according to a new survey, 88% of American teens now own an iPhone. That is the highest percentage of teen iPhone ownership in history. So a new survey by Piper Sandler came out this week, and not only did it say that 88% of teens now had an iPhone, but also that 88% of teens intended to purchase an iPhone as their next device. I think this is absolutely crazy, and that is in stark contrast to Apple having only 50%. And that is in stark contrast to Apple only having 57% market share among the entire US adult population. And it really shows the power that the brand has with the most influential market sector today. And the thing is, it's not like that the competition has an answer to this, because 10 years ago in 2015, Apple only had 66% market share among the same demographic. When I was a teenager, a little bit before then, I had a string of Palm Windows phones and then a few Palm WebOS phones, but obviously we don't have as good an alternative today. The only alternative to an iPhone is an Android phone, and it seems like that even the rise of cool folding phones are unable to capture the attention of this young demographic. Swag2Button comments, the pipeline from iPad kids to iPhone tweens is just crazy. Yeah, apparently most US toddlers have their own iPad these days, which is just insane in my mind, but that would make the jump to iPhones far easier, I guess. Corner Nap says, my nephews were given iPhones at the ripe old age of 5 and 3. Lamau, it is wild. Well, my first multimedia device was a PSP when I was 8, I think, and then I only progressed to having a smartphone when I was 11 with my Palm Trio. So the thought of a 3-year-old having their own phone is just as insane. So Homeboy808, who's a teacher referring to his students, says, yep, 90% also have iPhones. The other 10% are bullied into switching. I mean, is that really true? What happened to people being proud to think different? I honestly am, to be fair, I'm pretty embarrassed to have an iPhone right now. But the problem is that I'm pretty indifferent about the alternatives too. I don't believe that any Android phone is significantly better. It's just, you know, just as boring. However, if BlackBerry, Palm or Windows Phone were to come back, I would jump on them almost immediately. So why do you think that so many teens use iPhones, and what can Android makers do to capture this market? Let me know in the comments. And that brings us to the end of this week's Tech Hot Takes. If you enjoyed the chaos, be sure to like, subscribe and comment your hottest take below. Which story was dumbest in your eyes? Was it the panic buyers? Nintendo choosing to make a loss in the US, Siri faking its demos, or teens fully rejecting Android? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, I hope you are having an amazing day, and toodaloo!